welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Sinners. This is a new horror/action film starring Michael B. Jordan that just dropped in theaters today. It's already getting some pretty rave reviews. And I have some thoughts. I am going to start this review by saying I understand fully that I am going to be on the opposite side of the table in terms of some of my views that I think the majority of audiences will be. And I also wanted to add that I think that there are some nuances and quite a lot of elements to this film of which I am not the target audience. And so I'm looking at this movie just in and of itself as a film and not taking into account any of the messaging within it, which I don't feel that I have any sort of room or standing to speak on. So I just want to make that pretty clear so that no one thinks that I am talking about any elements of this film that were not intended for me, or that I don't have any understanding of. I don't think that that would be appropriate in this review. So I'm looking at Sinners just as a film in and of itself and whether or not I enjoyed that particular film. So I will just right out of the gate say that I do not think that Sinners is my style of film or the style of film that I enjoy typically. I am a very meat and potatoes, pumpkin spice latte kind of movie girl. I like a very basic film. I'm not really into those artsy ones. I feel like I have said this a lot in some of my reviews when it comes to a lot of like the A24 films, which I feel like are more artistic in nature. And I would put Sinners in that category. I think that this is a very well put together but artistic film. And so it's not going to be the typical, beginning, middle, and end plot wise that we are used to or that I am used to in a lot of the movies that come out of Hollywood. So right out of the gate, I feel like this one just was probably not geared for me as a general moviegoer, and I would say that I am a general moviegoer. And I think that a lot of that or a lot of those elements might be why I did not enjoy this one as much as a lot of other people are or have that have already seen this and reviewed it. Now, I will say I feel like a lot of the plot elements in this were slightly confusing to me or a little bit more convoluted than I was expecting. I think this one, at least in terms of the trailers, some of the things that I had heard about it, was really being touted as kind of like a Southern style From Dusk Till Dawn, which I can see how they made that comparison, but which I also don't agree with. I kind of walked into Sinners expecting that. I expected this From Dusk Until Dawn thing or like a 30 Days of Night, but with some really cool Southern elements. Obviously, this is taking place kind of in the Deep South, and I was looking forward to seeing some new voices and seeing some new storytelling coming out of a vampire film other than just like the usual standard that we have seen thus far. I think for me, the one thing that took me out of the movie the most or was the most confusing was the fact that Michael B. Jordan was cast in two roles. And it was a set of obviously identical twin brothers. I don't think, just personally watching the film, that the fact that they were twin brothers really played all that much into the plot at the end of the day. And for me, it was quite confusing because obviously Michael B. Jordan is playing both of these characters. They both look exactly identical to one another. I think the only real differences between the two were the style in which they were dressed. Like they had two different hats and then they were in just different colors. But other than that, there was nothing that really showed that these were two separate characters. I think even though I would say that Michael B. Jordan is an incredible actor, I don't think that he played two separate characters in this film, if that makes sense. I think that he played two of the exact same character, but they were named different things and were meant to be two different people. So it was essentially just one character in two halves. And I do understand that this was meant to be, identical twin brothers, but there wasn't really anything to either one's personality that stood out as different to me. And I did get pretty confused because there are a lot of external characters, like side characters in this film, where there was a period of time in the movie that I genuinely thought that one of the brothers was associated with two of the women in this film. And it turned out later in the movie that it was one brother was associated with one woman and the other brother was associated with the other. Like, if you are not paying very, very close attention, it's very easy to get them confused. I mean, they are identical right down to having the exact same grill, on the exact same teeth, but I think just on opposite sides of their mouth. Like, if they are not wearing their hats, which is really the only key element that separates them, they are exactly the same person. It's hard to tell them apart in context with the film. And I will say an additional thing that I kind of just wasn't all that fond of is that this film is not really the horror action film that it seems like it would be from the trailer. There is a very slow start to this movie. The action doesn't really happen, or the key part of the film doesn't really happen until about the last 30 or 40 minutes. And this is a 2-hour and 20-minute movie. There is a lot of setup to this film that I'm not sure. And again, I don't know if a lot of this is just context that I am missing because I am not 100% the intended target audience for this movie. There is a lot of setup here that I feel like doesn't necessarily relate to a lot of the later parts of the film. I also kind of was a little bit confused with why we had a vampire element in this movie at all. I think that it could have been done, other than the fact that obviously there is a meaning for that and an intention for that, I think if you were to take them out and also just include, there were some members of a particular group that starts with the letter K that I don't want to get dinged on or anything of that nature for saying in a review on YouTube or elsewhere. But there was that element in this movie as well, which was sort of a smaller portion. But I think if you were to take out the vampire element and kind of put in that other group in a larger capacity, you would have pretty much the exact same movie, and it might have been more understandable, I think, for the context in which a lot of the other things in the movie happen. I'm not sure if that is clear in how I am saying it, but there were a lot of other elements, I think, at the beginning of the film that once you get to the vampires, it became a little bit more muddied and a little bit more confusing as to, for me at least, why we needed that element in this film at all. I'm not sure, again, the motivation of the director. I've only seen one other of his films, which was Black Panther, and I feel like that's not a really genuine comparison between the two because they are quite different films in terms of the message being conveyed and what the purpose of the film is. Obviously one is superheroes and this one is definitely not meant to be that in any capacity. But for me, I don't know, this one just didn't fire on all of those cylinders for what I was expecting for one, and then for what I typically enjoy out of just a standard movie to begin with. I will say there were a lot of parts of this film that I did very much enjoy that I was a little bit more surprised had such a large portion of the film, I will say. This one is not brought across as a musical. I don't know if there was an intention there for that to be the case, and maybe that part or that portion of the film just kind of was an undercurrent of that. But there was a lot more music in this movie than I was expecting, especially for like a typical horror film. You know, you do have music, and music plays a very key role, but this one, I would say, at least for me, was borderline almost a musical. There is a lot of music going on inside this film, and I don't say that in a negative capacity. I normally really do not enjoy musicals, though I do enjoy like a good soundtrack. I don't usually enjoy it when the music sort of takes over the movie. And I think in this one, there is a lot of music. There is an undercurrent of music just happening for a majority of the film. And then you do have quite a lot of larger numbers of music, which do play into sort of the plot of the film. And I love this style of music. So I was not against having so much of it in this film, but it might be something just to point out as a thing that could potentially turn off some people if you don't enjoy there being a lot of breaks in between a film for music. I will say, just on that musical note, Miles Catone, I hope I am saying his name right, who plays the character of Sammy. I am not sure. I will have to Google this. I should have done it before I sat down to do my review, but I'm not sure if he is legitimately singing in this film. But if he is, remarkable. He will have an incredible career ahead of him. And I think for me in this movie, he was the standout character. And it was not the sort of bigger named actors, Haley Steinfeld and Michael B. Jordan, who I feel like a lot of people have been talking about. They were not the standouts for me in this one. Miles would be the standout for me in this film. I think he did incredible, especially considering that, at least from what I've heard, the director discovered him specifically for this film. And I think to be cast in a film where you are up against some really big players in terms of other actors, he held his own exceptionally well at the end of the day. And this film is incredibly well done. I think the acting is done really well in this. The set pieces and the way that this is shot, the way that it is filmed, is incredibly beautiful. And I really don't see anything like technically wrong with it or anything of that nature. I think all of the elements were there. It just was not my personal cup of tea in terms of films. I do think that maybe the plot is a little bit lacking, but again, I don't know how much of that is just because of the style of the film that is a little bit more artistic in nature, that already out of the gate just isn't something that I typically enjoy when I go to watch films a ton. But again, I do recognize that I am going to be one of maybe 2% of people who do not enjoy this one, because it is getting just incredible reviews, and I think that it deserves them. I don't think that my review in any way, shape, or form means that this is a bad film or a film that you should not go see. I would say if you are even remotely interested in going to see Sinners, that you should. I think it is glorious to look at in a film setting, like in a theater setting, I should say. But do just be prepared that this is not going to be as much along the horror lines as maybe you are expecting from the trailer. Do be prepared for a very slow start to get into the real sort of meat and potatoes, I guess, of that action and of that horror. And then do expect this to be like a little bit more on the artistic level of a film. And if all three of those things are not deal breakers for you, then you will absolutely love this movie. So those are really my thoughts on Sinners. I would love to know what you guys thought if you have seen this one. Subscribe to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.